Hello, friends. Tonight we begin with something stern, majestic, and absolutely ruthless. Life in the Roman Empire. But not as a senator, not an emperor, no laurel wreaths, no marble baths. Today you are not Julius Caesar. You are just you, unknowingly thrown into a world of sandals, sewage, and public suffering on the cross. So before you get comfortable, like this video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And write in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. It is always interesting to see who is joining us from all over the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soft background noise. And let's quietly immerse ourselves in today's journey together. It begins with light. A pale sun rises over tiled rooftops and marble temples. From a distance, the city of Rome shimmers like a jewel set on 7 hills. This is the capital of the most powerful empire the ancient world has ever known. But step closer, descend into the alleys, and that image disintegrates. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Rome reeks. There are no underground sewers for most people. Waste flows freely through narrow gutters in the streets, mixing with blood from butcher stalls, rotting food, urine, human excrement, and the runoff of thousands of unwashed bodies. Public latrines exist, yes, but they're communal, open, and rarely cleaned. Many simply relieve themselves where they stand. The streets are alive with flies. Noise follows the stench. Rome wakes up early and loudly. Vendors shout over each other, slaves rush with buckets, donkeys bray, children cry, metal tools clatter in forges. A baker's oven crackles, and somewhere nearby, a fight has already broken out, an argument over water, bread, or stolen shoes. It's hard to tell. And then there are the people. More than 1 million souls are crammed into this city. Rome is the largest urban center in the ancient world, and it shows. The streets teem with laborers, merchants, beggars, prostitutes, freedmen, soldiers, and slaves. Everyone is moving, pushing, sweating, shouting. There is no concept of personal space. If you stop walking for more than a few seconds, you'll be bumped aside or pickpocketed. Most residents don't live in marble villas. They live in insulated, multi-story tenement buildings made of wood, mud brick, and poor-quality cement. These structures are cheap, unstable, and dangerously flammable. The upper floors are the worst, cramped, cold in winter, scorching in summer, with no access to running water or toilets. Rent is expensive, the walls paper-thin, and collapses are frequent. Entire blocks have burned or crumbled in recent years, killing dozens. A single room might house an entire family. No furniture, no privacy. Just a pile of straw in a corner, a few clay pots, and a strong smell of mildew. Rats are common. Disease is rampant. If you're lucky, you start your day with a crust of bread, stale and hard, soaked in sour wine. This is called ientaculum, the Roman breakfast. There's no coffee, no fruit, no eggs. Most people never taste meat outside of religious festivals. A handful of olives or a dollop of garum, the notorious fermented fish sauce, is considered a luxury. Water? You'll need to fetch it from a public fountain, likely shared with 1,000 others. You'd best go early, before it runs dry or the queue grows too long. The city's architecture may be awe-inspiring, but it serves the powerful. Temples, forums, and monuments rise high to impress and intimidate. For the rest, daily life is survival. Beneath the grandeur, the common citizen of Rome lives in filth, noise, stress, and danger. Fires are frequent. Crime is constant. Building codes are non-existent. There are no police, only night watchmen who patrol with torches and clubs, often more interested in collecting bribes than keeping order. And then there's the fear. Fear of falling into debt. Fear of illness without treatment. Fear of angering the wrong person, a patrician, a soldier, a magistrate. Fear of being sold into slavery for failing to pay rent. In Rome, your life's worth is measured by your status. The poor have none. This is the reality of the eternal city, not marble, but mud and misery. If you were dropped into ancient Rome, one morning would be enough. You wouldn't survive the week. Step into a Roman marketplace at dawn, and your senses are assaulted again, not just by the noise, but by the smell. It is a mix of fresh-cut herbs, drying fish, animal blood, and something far less pleasant, the odor of food long past its prime, still being sold. There are no refrigerators, no ice, no safe storage. Meat and fish, if you can afford them, are slaughtered or caught, then left out in the heat. Spoilage happens fast. The solution? Drown it in heavy spices or soak it in garum, fermented fish sauce, to mask the rot. Garum is everywhere. To the Roman palate, it is the essence of flavor. Anchovies or other small fish left to liquefy under the sun, bones and all, until they become a pungent brown liquid. It's poured on bread, grains, vegetables, even fruit. The smell alone is nauseating to modern visitors, a mix of decay and salt, clinging to the air in every tavern and kitchen. For the poor, meals are simple and repetitive. Breakfast, ientaculum, is stale bread softened with watered-down wine. At midday, a light snack, maybe a porridge of barley or wheat, pulse, perhaps a few olives, or if you're lucky, some cheap cheese. Dinner is no feast, more porridge, maybe some cabbage or lentils, with a splash of garum to make it palatable. Meat? Rarely. Fish? Occasionally, if salted or dried. And yet, even this meager fare can be contaminated. Grain is often mixed with dust, sand, or ground chalk to make it weigh more. The bread you eat grinds your teeth as much as it fills your stomach. For the rich, food is excess. Wealthy patricians host banquets where the menu is a parade of the exotic and absurd. Dormice stuffed with nuts and honey. Roasted peacocks served with its feathers reattached for show. Flamingo tongues, considered a delicacy. Ostrich eggs, wild boar, and sea urchins. These dishes are not about sustenance. They are about power and prestige. Every plate is a performance, designed to remind guests of their host's wealth. But most Romans never taste such things. 90% live on grains and legumes. They depend on the state's grain dole, annona, a monthly distribution that keeps the poor fed just enough to prevent rebellion. Lose access to this ration, and you face starvation. Drinking water comes from aqueducts and public fountains. It seems advanced, an engineering marvel, but the pipes are often lined with lead. Slowly, silently, the population poisons itself with every sip. Those who can afford it mix their water with wine, partly for taste, partly for safety. There are taverns and street vendors, of course, thermopolia, the Roman version of fast food. But don't imagine anything like a modern cafe. These are dingy counters serving greasy, lukewarm stew to standing customers. A bite of sausage might taste fine, until you remember that it's made from whatever scraps couldn't be sold at market. Food in Rome tells you who you are. To eat dormice is to be powerful. To live on watery porridge is to be invisible. And no matter your class, your stomach is never safe. Contaminated food, lead-tainted water, and parasites lurk in every meal. For all its imperial splendor, the Roman diet is a gamble between hunger and disease, survival and slow decay. You wouldn't call it cuisine. You'd call it endurance. The roar comes first, a low, collective growl that shakes the very stones of the city. As you approach the Colosseum, it swells into a deafening howl. 50,000 voices, packed into an arena of limestone and iron, baying for blood. This is not theater. This is Rome's most cherished entertainment, the spectacle of death. The Colosseum is a machine for killing. Its floor, covered in sand, hides a labyrinth of tunnels where men and beasts wait in darkness. Above, the emperor and his court watch from shaded seats. Around them, senators, merchants, freedmen, slaves, every class of Rome, united in their hunger for violence. The games begin with venations, the hunts. Exotic animals, captured across the empire, are released into the arena. Lions from North Africa, bears from the Alps, leopards from Asia Minor. They are starved for days before their appearance. Hunters, lightly armed, enter the ring to kill or be killed. The crowd roars approval at every strike, every spurt of blood. Next come public executions. Condemned criminals, men, women, sometimes entire groups, are brought in. Their deaths are staged as myths. One may be dressed as Orpheus, torn apart by wild beasts. Another plays Icarus, hurled from a platform to the sand below. These are not symbolic performances. They are real deaths for entertainment. Finally, the gladiators. They are not volunteers. Most are slaves, prisoners of war, or criminals. They are trained to fight, but rarely to survive. The crowd decides their fate with a gesture of the hand. A defeated man kneels, bleeding, looking up at the emperor. If the audience demands it, if the emperor nods, he dies on the spot, cut down for sport. The cruelty is not hidden, it is celebrated. The poet Juvenal wrote of this frenzy, mocking the Roman people's obsession with panem et circenses, bread and circuses. They are fed just enough to live and entertained just enough to forget their misery. This is what leisure means in Rome, the suffering of others. The Colosseum alone could see hundreds of deaths in a single day. Animals imported from across the known world were slaughtered to extinction. Thousands of men died in its sands, some fighting, some begging, some burned alive. And the crowd cheered louder. You leave the arena numb, but the Romans leave elated. Their thirst for spectacle, for dominance over man and beast alike, has been quenched until tomorrow. For them, this is not barbarism. This is civilization at its peak. For you, it is a nightmare you cannot unsee. Rome is famous for its public baths, the thermae, vast complexes of pools, steam rooms, and exercise yards, designed as social hubs. At first glance, these baths seem like an ancient paradise of cleanliness and leisure. Yet beneath the marble columns and hot water, a darker reality awaits. Thousands of Romans flock to the baths daily. Men, women, slaves, and freedmen share crowded pools filled with lukewarm water. Unlike modern spas, the water is rarely drained or replaced during the day. Instead, it grows steadily dirtier as sweat, dirt, skin flakes, and bodily fluids mix in. Bathing is done communally, and hygiene standards are not what we expect. Soap, as we know it, did not exist. Instead, Romans used a strigil, a curved metal blade, to scrape grime and oil from their bodies. But this was only part of the process. The toilets were no better. Public latrines often consist of stone benches with holes, lined side by side. There are no partitions or privacy. People sit shoulder to shoulder, talking or exchanging gossip. Instead of toilet paper, Romans used a shared sponge on a stick, called a tersorium, rinsed in a bucket of water. That same sponge would be passed along to the next person. These conditions bred disease. Parasites like lice, fleas, and intestinal worms spread rapidly. Skin infections and fungal diseases thrived in damp, crowded environments. Respiratory illnesses were common, especially in poorly ventilated homes and public buildings. Medical knowledge was rudimentary at best. Physicians lacked understanding of germs or sanitation. Treatments ranged from herbal concoctions to painful surgeries without anesthesia. Mortality rates remained high, particularly among children. The consequences are grim. Average life expectancy in Rome hovered around 25 to 30 years. Infant and child mortality were staggering. Nearly half of children did not survive past age 5. Epidemics such as smallpox and malaria swept through the city repeatedly, decimating populations. Even the wealthiest citizens were not immune. The aqueducts that brought fresh water to the city also transported lead from the pipes, cisterns, and fittings. Lead poisoning may have contributed to chronic illnesses and infertility among the Roman elite. Despite the grandeur of their baths and aqueducts, Rome's cleanliness was superficial. The sights and smells of a clean bathhouse masked invisible dangers that claimed countless lives. For the average Roman, bathing was as much a social necessity as a health risk. You might imagine stepping into a luxurious spa, but instead, you find yourself wading in a shallow pool of sweat, dirt, and disease, surrounded by strangers. Cleanliness was a luxury, and for many, a deadly illusion. Rome's grandeur was built on the backs of millions who had no rights, no freedoms, and often no future. Slavery was not an exception. It was the foundation of Roman society and economy. Millions of people lived as slaves, prisoners of war, debtors, born into bondage, or simply sold by their families. Their lives were considered expendable. Unlike modern conceptions, slavery in Rome was not based on race, but on power and conquest. Slaves worked everywhere, in homes, workshops, fields, mines, and even in the imperial bureaucracy. Some were highly skilled artisans. Others were gladiators forced to fight to the death. But the common fate was harsh treatment, long hours, brutal punishments. If a slave ran away, was disobedient, or suspected of rebellion, the punishment was swift and merciless. Flogging, branding, chains, or death were routine. The law offered no protection, Slaves were property, nothing more. For free citizens, life was no guarantee of safety either. Debt was a deadly trap. If you failed to pay, you could be enslaved or have your family torn apart. The streets teemed with beggars, many one misfortune away from being sold. Justice was biased toward the powerful. If a patrician's chariot struck a poor man, it was often shrugged off. If a wealthy landowner wished to seize your land, there was little recourse. Political corruption was rampant, and bribery was the norm. Women, too, faced strict limitations. They could not vote or hold office. Often married in early teens, their status was tied to their father or husband. Property rights were minimal and social mobility rare. Abuse was common and largely unpunished. Rome was also plagued by constant threats: fires, floods, epidemics, famine. The great city burned repeatedly, with wooden buildings and narrow streets turning into death traps. Food shortages could spark riots. Disease outbreaks claimed thousands in weeks. Survival depended on connections, luck, and endurance. One wrong move, one lost favor, one illness could mean ruin or death. The average life expectancy hovered barely beyond childhood. For the powerful, Rome was a kingdom of luxury and influence. For the majority, it was a daily struggle against invisibility, hunger, and despair. This was the true face of the Roman Empire, a glittering surface masking a world where life was cheap and freedom rarer than gold. If you believed you could live here peacefully, you wouldn't last a day. Conclusion: why you would not last a day in the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire remains one of history's greatest marvels, a civilization that shaped law, architecture, language, and governance for millennia. Its monuments still inspire awe. Its legacy still resonates. But beneath that grandeur lay a reality harsh enough to break the strongest of wills. You woke in a city choking on its own filth, crowded beyond reason, where every breath tasted of smoke, sweat, and decay. Your meals were bland at best, often rancid or tainted, served with a pungent fish sauce that clung to your fingers and clothes. Your entertainment was watching men and animals die in the sand, blood spilled to satisfy a thirsty crowd. Your bathhouse was a breeding ground for disease rather than a sanctuary of cleanliness. Your neighbors could be thieves, slaves, or desperate souls one misfortune away from ruin. The law was not your shield. It protected only the powerful. Your body and labor belonged to others if you were poor or enslaved. Your life expectancy was measured not in decades, but in the fragility of survival against famine, fire, and disease. This was not the romanticized Rome of marble and triumphs. This was Rome's dark heartbeat, a city of suffering, cruelty, and inequality. Could you endure even a single day here? The answer is no. You would be crushed by the stench, overwhelmed by the noise, starved by the scarcity, and broken by the brutality. The Roman Empire was a world away from modern comfort, safety, and rights. It was a world where only the ruthless, the lucky, or the powerful thrived, and the rest simply survived or didn't. You would not last a day.